mentioned in the film that Tom was a bit reluctant at first to let you film him at his home.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of convince him to document Asher at all?
I think the documenting Asher he didn't really have a problem with, because he's he's very proud of his son, and he really wanted to do whatever he could to kind of get the word out about Asher. And I think sponsorship was obviously another thing that could be helped by something like this.
Yeah.
The house, going back to the house, I think that was, he's a very proud man, and he, feels very badly that he can't provide for his family very well. So, we talked about that a lot, and I think what I said to convince him in the end was, if this was a story about a rich family in Malibu, it wouldn't really be the same. There wouldn't be the same kind of spirit behind it.
Yeah.
So I think once he kind of knew that it was okay that they weren't, from some rich neighborhood, I think he kind of understood where the struggle was. And it's kind of a rags to riches story,
Yeah. Were there any difficulties filming in Compton? As you know, it touched on the gang violence around there.
I don't have the same challenges, so it's easy for me to walk away from a situation like that. So I see his struggles. Andrew, is a product of that environment. Unfortunately, he gave up swimming. And when you live in a neighborhood like that, there really isn't much inspiration to keep going. And I know Tom tried as hard as he could, and Andrew was just hanging out with the wrong people and got into the wrong crowd. So I really sympathize with Tom on a lot of levels, because it's a real challenge to do what he's doing.
Now, of course, there's new narration throughout the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
Did you write that whilst you were filming, or was it something you put together in the editing process?
It was in the editing process. I wrote a script. Once I had we shot over 220 hours of footage, so it was a lot to kind of comb through and find a good story. There's obviously a million stories that you can tell. And so once I'd written the script and the basic structure, that's when I went back and forth with voiceover. I wasn't sure whether to do it. I wasn't sure if I should be doing it. And I did test scenes where I would get other people to voice over it. And every single time I showed them to people, they would say, "We want to hear from the filmmaker." So that's kind of where that came from.
Interesting. Sorry, this is where I spilled a little bit. Did Asher teach you any of his skateboarding tricks while you were there?
No, I have a neck injury, so I can't really on the skateboard. But I've seen him teach kids much older than him.
Really?
And it's quite interesting to watch. He's a very focused little kid. When he's skating, he talks like a 25-year-old, and he focuses like a pro. And you hear him talk and direct, and say, like, he'll actually talk about body movements in terms of, where your shoulders go, that's where the board's going to go, and he's very technical. And then the minute he steps off a skateboard, he's a little kid again. He just wants to play tag.
And are you still in contact with the Bradshaw family? Do you know how they are now?
I'm in close contact. Yeah, it's a little bit of a limbo situation right now, because Asher's still very young. He's been sponsored by a lot more companies since we finished this. And he's doing TV appearances and things like that. But really, at this point, he's only 10 now. He can go into the X Games when he's 12. And I think at that point, things will really blow up for him.
So after delving into this subject, what is your whole opinion on young skaters in the industry?
I think what I learned from this is that skateboarding is there's a lot of camaraderie in skateboarding, which I didn't know before. I thought it was kind of the badass rebel sport. But I met some really amazing kids who had more sportsmanship than I've seen in a lot of other sports. So it really kind of raised my opinion of skateboarding. I see it on a different level.
And what kind of message would you want the audience to take away from this film?
I think the main message is just, when you really, really want something, and you look at someone like Asher, he's just an inspiration. They have so many struggles, but if the passion's there and it's strong enough, you just will do it. I have no doubt he's going to blow up and just be, the next Tony Hawk, as a lot of people have said.
So what's next for you now you've done this documentary?
That's the million-dollar question. Aaron, who's his little brother, is now doing tricks at 3 that Asher was doing at 5. So there's an interesting dynamic there in terms of, people have said, oh, we should do a documentary on Aaron. But I think definitely I've been bitten by the documentary bug, so something like that, yeah.
With this being your first film, what advice would you give to up-and-coming filmmakers?
I think just go with your instinct and your passion. It was a very difficult thing for me to do. I was a one-man band really until post-production, and that was a tough thing to do. But I think, you know, if the subject matter, if you believe in the subject matter enough, then you'll just make it happen.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all me. Does anyone in the audience like to ask Katherine any questions? Please don't be shy.
Hi.
Hi.
I absolutely loved it. It was so moving.
Thank you. Thank you very
I think
much.
from a perspective of a parent, and just for lots of reasons. And also, I find it very inspiring that it's your first film. Did you go to film school, or what? How did this come about?
I come from camera originally, so I was a camera technician for a long time, and then I moved into directing about 6 years ago, doing music videos, commercials, and that kind of thing. And I always knew I wanted to do a feature. I needed, you know, the inspiration, and this literally fell in my lap. So that's kind of my background.
And the camera looks like sometimes you were shooting from the hip and not, you know, it was a little covert at times. What were you using?
It was a Canon XH-A1. So it's a nice camera because it's HDV, so it's a smaller camera. It's tape, which I wanted just because, you know, I didn't have to worry about downloading cards onto a laptop. When you're chasing a 6-year-old around for 14 hours a day, you got to just have a tape that you can just shove in really quickly and go. And the other thing is just having a smaller camera got me into places that I don't think I would have got into had I had a big professional-looking camera, which kind of people start to say, well, do you have a permit and that type of thing. So, no.
Anyone else?
You know, that the evening that he got the call, the final, like, you know, the break that he got, and just before that, as you were saying in the film, that, you know, everything had almost kind of fallen apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so from your point of view, as a filmmaker, when you're following the story and you don't know, you know, where it's going, what goes on in your mind, it's like...
I was actually very worried for a long time because if that call hadn't happened, I didn't have an ending, really. So it was a big risk, you know, and especially being my first documentary, you can't control the story. You just have to let it unfold and hope that it doesn't take 10 or 15 years. So, I mean, when they got the call, I was obviously extremely happy for the family, but I also had a little, like, yes moment for myself because I knew I finally had a movie, so...
Any other questions? Well, I think that's the end of it. Not
Okay.
too much for you. Thank you so much. I think everyone was really moved by that.
Thank
It was
you.
such a lovely story.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Nothing around for applause.